This year marks the Met's 150th anniversary, and the exhibition reflects this time span. In essence, the show is a meditation on fashion and temporality, drawing out the tensions between change and endurance, and ephemerality and persistence. Recently, time has dominated discussions within the fashion community, and these conversations have centered around the accelerated production, circulation, and consumption of fashion to meet the commercial demands of an interconnected and digitally synchronized world. But we're realizing that these demands are having a detrimental effect not only on creativity, but also on the environment. So we thought it might be a good time to explore the temporal character of fashion from a historical perspective. The exhibition presents 150 years of fashion culled almost exclusively from the Costume Institute's collection along two parallel timelines. The first features 60 ensembles arranged in chronological order from 1870 to the present. It focuses on the forward-moving and progress-oriented nature of fashion that's governed by novelty, ephemerality, and obsolescence. The second timeline intersperses a series of 60 interruptions that pre- or post-date the first timeline, but relate to them in terms of shape, motif, material, technique, or decoration. The 60 ensembles in each timeline are primarily in black to emphasize their changing silhouettes and interconnection. The exhibition has been designed as two enormous clocks with 60 illuminated tick marks that reference the number of minutes in an hour. Each tick contains two ensembles. The front object represents the linear chronological timeline, and the back object the non-linear fragmented timeline. Together, the timelines express the concept of duration as outlined by the French philosopher Henri Bergson, in which time exists as a continuous flow, and the relationship between the past and the present is one of coexistence rather than succession. And viewed from this perspective, each pairing achieves a kind of temporal autonomy through its union of the past and the present, a vision of time that's freed from the confines of chronology. Virginia Woolf serves as the ghost narrator of the exhibition. Her writings on time are read aloud in the galleries by Nicole Kidman, Meryl Streep, and Julianne Moore, who starred in the 2002 movie The Hours, which was based on Michael Cunningham's novel inspired by Mrs. Dalloway.
For it is a difficult business, this timekeeping. Nothing more quickly disorders it than contact with any of the arts.
Charles Frederick Worth introduced the princess line in 1876. And the princess line was basically a one-piece dress, and it was formed without a waist seam. So vertical seams would continue from the shoulders through to the skirt, which created a very form-fitting hourglass silhouette. And typically, the princess line wasn't worn with a bustle, but back interest was maintained through a series of puffs. And we've paired it with Alexander McQueen's famous bumpster skirt from 1995. And the McQueen's bumpster skirt basically is a radical reinterpretation of the princess line. He cut the skirt so low that it showed the base of the spine, but also the top of the buttocks. And McQueen felt that the base of the spine was the most erotic part of the body, both for men and for women. So Worth reintroduced the bustle in the early 1880s. We've paired it with a coat by Yohji Yamamoto from 1986. What Yohji's done is cut away the back of the coat and inserted a poof of nylon, which has the same extension as the bustle from the mid-1880s. The early 1890s saw the introduction of the jigo sleeve, which is also known as the leg button sleeve, which you see in this dinner dress by Mrs. Arnold, who was a Brooklyn dressmaker. And we've paired it in the disruptive timeline with an ensemble by Rei Kawakubo from 2004. And it's basically comprised of two 1890s-inspired jackets, one used as a jacket and one as a skirt. As you can see from the jacket, it's asymmetrically cut, so the closures are misaligned. And it's also displaced the jigo sleeve to the center of the jacket. And the jacket, which has been made into the skirt, has been twisted around. So the jigo sleeves are at the front and the back, almost like elephant trunks. So this is a riding jacket from 1902, and it was made for Princess Alexandra, Queen Consort to Edward VII. And this particular jacket was inspired by men's formal suits, French formal suits from the 18th century. The scale of the embroidery and the ribbon work, along with the puff sleeves, very much locates it within fashionable women's dress of the early 20th century. And we've paired it with an ensemble by Nicolas Ghesquière for Louis Vuitton from 2018. For this collection, Nicolas and his design team came to the Met to be inspired by our 18th century formal menswear. And again, he's combined both historical and contemporary details. Instead of embroidering the floral pattern, it's woven, and it creates a kind of a flatness that seems to be computer generated. He's also styled it with a pair of athletic shorts, which suggests a sporty ease, very, very atypical of the Ancien regime. So we're jumping ahead 25 years in the timeline to 1927 and the chemise dress, which created a very planar, tubular silhouette. This is an example of Gabrielle Chanel's little black dresses, and it's arguably the dress of the decade, if not dress of the century. And typical of her very modernist aesthetic, she combines both formality and informality and softness and severity. And we've paired it with a dress by Virgil Abloh for Off-White from 2018 with little black dress in quotation marks. The idea of looking at sort of ordinary objects and elevating them to the level of art. And in this particular case, he's used the little black dress really as a wry gesture, as an homage to the enduring appeal of Chanel's little black dress. So we're jumping ahead in the timeline again to 1938 with an ensemble by Schiaparelli. In the mid to late 1930s, evening suits comprising a decorative jacket and a long skirt or dress became very fashionable, and they were popularized by Schiaparelli. In this particular one, she's used two broken mirrors, hand mirrors, to frame the breasts of the wearer. And the inspiration actually came from the salons of War and Peace in the Hall of Mirrors in Versailles. It was made just before the war, so these broken mirrors took on the symbolism, almost they became talismans, I suppose, of hope and courage and even determination for the war that was to come. And we've paired it with an ensemble by Yves Saint Laurent. It's called his Broken Mirrors jacket, and he's used the back of the actual jacket as one frame for the mirror. The mirror is made from silver foil that he's fractured with crystals and outlined in gold foil. You know, he felt that Schiaparelli's clothes lent self-assurance and confidence to the wearer, which is also traits that you see in this particular piece. Harper's Bazaar in 1943 commissioned the dressmaker Bertha Black-Lurie to reconstruct a late 1920s man's tailcoat. So this is actually originally a man's tailcoat from 1929. And we've paired it with a tuxedo by Martin Margiela, who's known for upcycling. In this particular piece, he's used a man's tuxedo and oversized it instead of refitting it to the female form. So it's actually a resizing of a man's tuxedo rather than a refitting of it.
An hour may be accurately represented on the timepiece of the mind by 1 second. This extraordinary discrepancy between time on the clock and time in the mind is less known than it should be and deserves fuller investigation.
So we've arrived in Clock 2, the second half of the exhibition. We've jumped forward in the timeline to the 1960s, to 1968. The 60s saw a reprise of the chemise silhouette from the 1920s. And this is an example by Rudi Gernrich. The only decoration you see on the dress is a zipper that starts on the back of the neck and spirals around the body to the hem, very similar to Charles James's taxi dress from the 1930s. And he named it the taxi dress because he liked the idea of a modern woman undressing in a taxi. And this dress had a similar sort of feel for quick, speedy dressing or undressing. And we paired it with a floor-length version by Azzedine Alaïa from 2003. And again, the sole decoration is a zipper spiraling again from the top of the bust to the hem. Alaïa began experimenting with zippers around the 1980s. In this particular piece, he's used it almost like an integral seam to trace, but also to enhance the contours of the body. So punk introduced the language of deconstructivism into fashion, which was enthusiastically embraced by Kawakubo and Yamamoto. Kawakubo and Yamamoto burst onto the Paris fashion scene in 1981, and their sort of shapeless and seemingly shapeless and oversized garments, usually in black, very much radicalized and revolutionized the Western notions of beauty and style. And this particular dress was made in 1983. It's cut on the bias, but it also has these rips and tears that show the matte and lustrous side of the fabric, and is very typical of the deconstructivist tendencies. We've paired it with a dress by Marc Jacobs that dates to 2008. This particular dress, it's comprised of a nude pink slip, on top of which has been draped black fabric with embroidered in bugle beads. And it gives the illusion that the dress is just about to fall off the wearer. So this dress dates to the same year as Rei Kawakubo's deconstructed dress, but it couldn't be more antithetical to her poverty deluxe aesthetic. It's made by Karl Lagerfeld for Chanel, and it was actually his first couture collection for Chanel in 1983. And it references the heritage of the house with this trompe l'oeil jewellery that references the costume jewellery that became part of Chanel's signature. It was embroidered by the House of Lesage very intricately with beads and pearls and crystals. But the actual necklace serves a structural as well as a decorative detail. It's actually a halter neck, so it actually supports the weight of the dress. And we've paired it with a dress by Sarah Burton for Alexander McQueen from 2019. And it's basically a hyperbolic interpretation of Karl Lagerfeld's dress. She used a very simple shift dress and embroidered it with a field of crystals. The inspiration actually came from the chandeliers from the gilded ballrooms in Blackpool in the north of England, where Sarah was raised. So we've jumped again ahead of the timeline to 2006 with this piece by Undercover, Jun Takahashi. Takahashi is very influenced by Rei Kawakubo and Martin Margiela's deconstructivist aesthetic and very unconventional techniques. In this particular piece, he's used vintage tuxedos and ripped off the sleeves and left the seams unfinished. And he's wrapped them around the body end to end, almost like a straitjacket. We've paired it with a much more refined example of a designer reinterpreting the tuxedo. This is Christian Dior from 1949. And like Takahashi, Dior has taken components of the tuxedo, in this particular case, the silk file lapels and the cummerbund, draped it around the waist. Instead of confining the body, he's buttoned the silk file at the back and left it to fold gently around the ankles of the wearer. So two very radical reinterpretations of the tuxedo. This dress is by Iris van Herpen. It dates to 2012. Iris's innovative use of 3D printing technologies has very much placed her at the vanguard of fashion. So this dress was inspired by the artist Philip Beasley's installation, Hylozoic Ground, which you can see in the biomorphic silhouette that she's created. The bodice, the very fitted bodice, contrasts with the skirt, which has which is all made out of layers of plastic PVC, which have been initially laser cut and hand applied, but it gives the feeling of a living organism. And we've contrasted it or paired it with a dress by Charles James from 1951. As you can see, the soft puffs of the skirt very much reference these lobed effects of Iris van Herpen's dress. James was well known for refining endlessly his designs, and this particular design was originally conceived in 1941, but it reached its greatest extension and the most hyperbolic form in 1951, which you see here. We end the exhibition with this piece from Viktor and Rolf's Spring 2020 Haute Couture collection, which was a direct response to the temporal acceleration that's come to define fashion in the 21st century. And like many designers, Viktor and Rolf have begun to embrace conscious creativity and move toward slow fashion with its emphasis on value and quality and longevity. Since 2016, Viktor and Rolf's haute couture designs have been produced with surplus fabric from past collections. And for their Spring/Summer 2020 collection, they created a series of patchwork dresses from their archive of fabric swatches. And this dress is made up of samples of floral and geometric lace. It celebrates handcraft and shared labor, and its simple silhouette recalls the pre-industrial era. And we ended the exhibition with the dress because the patchwork design seems to serve as an apt metaphor for the future of fashion and the importance of community, collaboration, and sustainability.
What the future might bring, heaven only knew. Change was incessant, and change, perhaps, would never cease. High battlements of thought, habits that had seemed durable as stone went down like shadows at the touch of another mind, and left a naked sky and fresh stars twinkling in it.